Good. All right. I'm John Kelly. I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic. And my sobriety date is September the 4th, 1999. And for that, I'm very, very grateful. And I'm not one of these dudes that go around like say, well, I got me a little job today. Look what God's doing for me. I'm so grateful. I got me a little girlfriend today. Look what God's doing for me. I'm so grateful, blah, blah, blah. God don't want to hear that mess. God wants to see me in action. So what better way for me to show the God of my understanding, my gratitude, to get off my butt and take this program to somebody who was dying just like I was. That's how I show God my gratitude. And for that, I am very, very grateful. Thank you to the committee for having me here. I've never been to, I guess Nebraska didn't get the memo. It's friggin' spring. They asked me how I was in Dallas this morning, and it was like 6 o'clock, and I was out on the back patio like in boxer shorts and no shirt on, and I'm like, I know it was going to be cold, but the wind, I don't know, man. I don't know. Hopefully it gets warm here soon. But thank you for having me, everybody. The people I've met have been great, and I hope to meet a whole bunch more of you. I see Sue and Keith down there. It's been a few years. Nice seeing you guys again. That's cool. Peter will be here tomorrow, I guess. Him and his gel for his hair. But Peter's awesome. And I'm just thrilled to be here. Drinking does not agree with me. I drank a whole bunch, and it worked in the beginning, and I won't spend a lot of time on all that stuff, but, I was not brought up to be an alcoholic. I'm the first kid, I'm the first grandkid. I got to name my grandparents, Ma and Pa, And I was treated like a prince from the time I was born until, that's all I could remember. All I can remember is everybody around me telling me how great I was going to be. Everything is going to be cool. My parents got divorced, but, they loved me to death, and my mom did the best she could, and she got remarried, and I had the best shoes and the best clothes, and I made straight A's, and I played every sport, and I was damn good at all of them. I got ranked in tennis, and on paper, I looked like a pretty sharp kid. On the inside, my brain is telling me, you suck. You're a loser. And I don't know where that came from, but that's just how I grew up. There's 2 sets of twins below me. They bond. I'm like the odd man out, And I was just uncomfortable always. That's all I can remember. I remember like if I had to give a report at school, I would throw up the night before. It was awful being me. And we lived in Miami, Florida. I'm 15 years old. I'd heard the horror stories because on my dad's side of the family, there's some drinkers, the Kellys, right? And I'd heard about Uncle Melvin. Uncle Melvin, you may have an Uncle Melvin in your family. In my family, Uncle Melvin bled out on the front porch with a gastric hemorrhage due to his alcoholism, right? Don't be like Uncle Melvin. Nobody drinks in my immediate family. So here I am at this tennis camp in Florida, 15 years old, with another little 15-year-old boy and 3 older women. They were like 17. And we had a free night on a Saturday night before all these other kids from all parts of the country and other continents, wherever they came over. So we had a free night, and the girls decided it'd be cool if we had some beer. Now, I don't know where this came from, but I immediately rose to the occasion and said that Peter and I will get the beer. Never mind the fact that we don't have IDs, transportation, or anything, but we're going to hook us up with the beer. And we knew where there was like a store down the road, and so we ran. It was like, the conventional store, 2 miles uphill both ways. We ran to this convenience store, and I got a case of Budweiser and put it on the counter, and the guy looked at me like my head was on fire. And I immediately rose to the occasion again and explained our situation. We're down at the tennis camp. We got 3 little hot girls back there, and he said, meet me out back. And I met him out back, and I gave him a $20 bill. He gave me a case of Budweiser, and we ran it all the way back to the tennis camp. Put the beer in the bathtub on ice. The girls came up, and we started to drink those Budweisers. And I don't know if it was the first Budweiser or the second Budweiser, But suddenly, I had arrived. Suddenly, all of the dots were connected. Suddenly, I had answers to questions that hadn't even been asked. Suddenly, I was in there with my close friends, and it was all perfect. It was the best thing that ever happened in my life. Last thing I remember is seeing like a little 17-year-old pair of boobies, and that was it. And a pattern was set, believe you me. But that was my first experience. And I'm not like some of these knuckleheads out there. I didn't get into a whole lot of trouble early on. From the time I was 15 until I was like 25, alcohol was the best thing that ever happened in my life. Honest to God. It made a good day better, and it made a crappy day tolerable. It fixed anything and everything. It worked. Until it didn't. You know, and as my drinking progressed, I remember, you know, my family was worried about my drinking. You know, I remember I was like 19 or so, and my mom took me to this psychiatrist or whatever in Dallas, and I'm prepping myself for this psychiatrist meeting because the family's concerned about it because I'm partying too much and all this stuff. And I am lying through my teeth about how much I drink, and she's still writing me down as an alcoholic, you know. And we used to have, I don't know if they had them here, the Schick centers where they fix drinkers, you know, and they, you know, they'd have a commercial on TV and two people be running through a meadow and it's all smiles and for this treatment center. And then they would ask you some questions at the end of the commercial, like, do you drink in the morning, you know? And I remember being 19 or 20 by myself in my apartment lying to the television set. And I'm still a friggin' alcoholic, you know? And over time, that progression kicks in, and little by slowly, friends start to fade away, you know. And I'm going from one university to another university and hopping from, you know, one relationship to another, and families yapping at me, and the consequences starting to build up. And I'm skipping a whole bunch of stuff, but I've wrecked a few cars, not mine. So if I start drinking and I want to borrow your car, don't let me. I was in 1988. I was at a crossroads in between universities. I didn't know what I was going to do. The relationship wasn't working out. I'm drinking my you-know-what off, plus a lot of other things. And I had my Aunt Helen was in AA in Dallas, and I thought, maybe I need treatment. You know? So here it is, like the Summer Olympics are going on, and it was a Saturday, I'm all bottomed out, and I called my sainted mother, and she's crying, I'm crying, and I told her, I said, you know, I think I need treatment. And now she really starts to cry. You'd have thought I won Powerball. Hallelujah, praise God, we've been praying, blah, blah, blah. Come to the house. And I don't know how she swung it, but she got me into one of those nice treatment centers, those fancy pants ones, those $30,000 big book treatment centers, you know, where they're co-ed, and they've got a basketball court and a swimming pool, and the chicks still have all their teeth. I mean, it was a good treatment center. And that was my first experience with Alcoholics Anonymous. And I remember I was like 25 or 26, and my roommate, I'm still in my scrubs coming out of detox, and it was his day to tell his story in that group of how he got to his sordid tale of how he got to the hospital, right? And and he's like 40-something, an old guy to me, and he's telling this god-awful story, and I'm thinking in my head, damn, this SOB needs to be here. This guy's got some problems, right? And little did I know, 11 years later, when I got sober, my story made his look like a walk through the park. Because what I thought was bad in 1988, got so infinitely worse as time went on. And I got out of there, and I don't know how y'all do your meetings here, but I got me a little sponsor there from one of these little fancy pants groups, and because they were coming up there carrying the message to the treatment center. And so I started going to this, and it was this fancy meeting in North Dallas where everybody dresses up and everybody's hip, slick, and cool, and be like 60 or 70 people at 6 o'clock, and they'd have a chairperson, and the chairperson would read something or have a topic, and then he would go around the room maliciously pointing out people to share. And I don't like talking in front of people, and I don't know what to share, and it was the most painful experience I've ever had. I hated it. And I hung on for as long as I could hang on, and then I go do what I do. and things get worse and worse. And I end up in and out of AA, getting a chip here, getting a chip there, doing this, trying this, and, these things aren't working out. And fast forward, I get a great job. I'm working at Hard Rock Cafe in Dallas. I started out as a waiter, became head waiter, bartender, head bartender, going into management, go to corporate, move off, see the world, do all these great things, and I can't stop drinking. And I work with knuckleheads, man. And we go home at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and they pass out, and I'm still rolling every day. And I wore out my welcome there, and I had to turn in my keys one day. The story is, I was supposed to give a presentation to all these corporate bigwigs on a Sunday morning at 7 a.m. before we opened up the restaurant. And it was on a Saturday. I worked the day shift, and so I was going to be good and work on my little presentation that night. That was my plan. And a buddy of mine came to me when I was doing checkouts at 5 o'clock, and he's like, hey, let's run on down to Hooters and have some wings, see our buddy Dennis. And I'm like, dude, I got to work on this presentation. He's like, look, we'll just go have some wings, we'll have a beer or two, go work on the presentation. One beer leads to the next beer, leads to the next beer, leads to another bar, to that bar where they have a pole and the girls are spinning around. And the next thing you know, I'm at a party after that. And I'm rolling home about 6:15, and I got to be at work at 7 o'clock, so you know the drill. And that was a pretty sad day for yours truly, because I love those people and I love that gig. And I made a firm resolution after that day, I ain't never doing this again, and I meant it. And I started, and I got all the books. I got all the Tony Robbins books, and I got Way of the Peaceful Warrior, and I'm doing Tai Chi and crap, and I'm running 10 miles a day doing push-ups, and I am going to show these people that they missed out on JK. I am somebody. And I formed a little deal, and I'm going to do my own restaurant in Deep Ellum in Texas, and I'm going to show these guys missed out, and I'm not touching a drop, and things are going good. My bank's going to front me the money to put in my first restaurant. Everything's going good. Swear to God, 2 days before I sign on the dotted line, I'm sitting around my house working on a business plan, and the thought crosses my mind, a shot of Sambuca would be good. And there had been a bottle of Sambuca in my freezer for 90 days. And I went over there, cracked the top, poured a big, thick glass of that stuff, and drank that. And that experiment went so well. I drank the entire bottle, called the guys at the liquor store who knew me personally. They made a home delivery after they closed. I went on a 7 or 8 day bender, did not get the restaurant, did not sign on the dotted line, and ended up in San Juan, Puerto Rico. To escape. And if you've never been there, that's a really bad place to escape for a person like me. Because rum is very, very, I don't like rum, but god dang, just look at rum is very, very cheap in Puerto Rico, and so are outside issues. And they're very, very pure, if you catch my drift. And I didn't have anything to keep me in check, and I'm drinking my you-know-what off, and I'm drinking a couple of fifths of Bacardi black rum every day, plus beers, plus whatever else I was doing, day in, day out, endlessly. My buddy that I was staying with finally had to call my sainted mother and tell her, you got to get him off this island because he's going to die. He was going out of town with his girlfriend to another island, and I was on a Sunday, and I told him I was going to stop. I said, when you guys get back in a few days, I'll be stopped. And I put the plug in the jug, and I stopped, and it was awful, awful. I couldn't walk. If I took a sip of water, it came back up, and for the first couple days of that week, it was just brutal. And I remember I kind of settled down by Wednesday night, and I remember you could hear the ocean, the waves crashing over the ocean, and it was just good. I'm reading a Rolling Stone magazine, and I think I can hear the neighbors next door, which I'd never noticed before. And come to find out that wasn't the neighbors. And then soon the death metal starts playing in my head. And I went on my first trip of delirium tremens from Wednesday night to Saturday morning that week. I had some people saw me walking around San Juan, walking into walls, and I was carrying a butcher knife, mumbling to myself. And I went to this little AA group there on that Saturday, and I met this guy. See, my experience in AA I skipped a whole lot of years because now we're up to like 96 or so. I skipped a whole lot of stuff. But my early impressions of AA is people sitting around a table like, I'm just glad to be sober today, and they're friggin' hanging on for dear life. And it's a friggin' miserable existence day in, day out, trying not to drink. That was my impression of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I meet this guy in San Juan. His name is Andy Aponte, and this guy was on fire. And I guess he lost the bet, so he took me and he started to work with me. And I never read the big book, and he starts reading it to me, and we start doing stuff. I started to get a little bit of hope, and I got a 30-day chip, and things are looking good for yours truly. And I'm starting to feel the power, And I remember not a cloud on the horizon. I'm getting a 60-day chip. We talked during the day, and he says, you're coming tonight. And I was like, oh, you bet. He says, you're getting your 60 days. I said, I know it. He said, well, we're going to take you out to dinner afterwards. And I'm like, dude, it'll be great. I'm looking forward to this. Not a cloud on the horizon. I leave my place, got my little backpack. I had to catch the bus to get across to Condado. As I'm walking down the street, I hear this, Mida, JK. And I look, and it's two girls I knew, shady characters. Sitting on an outside patio, I stopped to say hello, and the next thing you know, I'm on a 4 or 5 or 6 day blackout. And I can't stop. I tried to end it one night there. That failed miserably. You can see me afterwards. I'll tell you about that. It's awful. So my mom sent my buddy a ticket, flew me back to Dallas. Or she lived up north of Dallas. So now I'm like 30-something years old, no car, no job, living with my mama, no friends, no nice anything, trying to get sober again. And I'm driving her car into Denton, Texas, and there's some big book thumpers there, and this one guy takes me under his wing, and I start to get a little hope, and I start to do the deal. And there's an outlook, And there's this girl running around our group, and everybody wanted this girl. And I got the girl. And we started going to meetings together. It was great. We were going to AA dances together. And for 3 or 4 months, the goose hangs high. Until it was like 3 or 4 days before Christmas, and she decided she didn't want to play ball no more. And I remember going into a little meeting there in Gainesville, Texas, and there's some good old-timers there, and I've known them. I've met them before. I know who they are. They know who I am. And now all I got to do is go up to one of these old-timers and pull them aside and say, hey, I'm not going to make it because the writing's on the wall. I just got dumped. I haven't been doing anything to work these steps. I'm screwed. But I don't do that. See, I'm the guy, you ask me how I'm doing, I'll tell you I'm doing great. Got 7 months. Feel better, sleep better, work better. It's all good. And I remember sitting down that little discussion meeting they had at Gainesville, and since it was right before Christmas, they did a thing called a gratitude meeting. And that rubbed me the wrong way. To hear Jim Bob, he's all grateful because Jim Bob Jr.'s in from Podunk, Texas, and he's got 34 days, and ain't God marvelous? And I'm dying. And I remember getting up and going to the bathroom and washing my hands, and I looked at my watch, and liquor stores close at 9 in Texas, and it was like 8:43, and my brain says, haul ass. And I walked right past all those suckers and made it to the liquor store and got me some vodka. I don't know how y'all drink up here in Nebraska, but I don't mess around with pints and stuff. I get the 1.75 of Skull vodka, that big plastic jug, and I pop out that little governor they got in the top, and I drink. It comes in a glass. I don't need to be poured in another one, And my saint and mama got to come home on Christmas Eve to find me blacked out. And I did that for the next couple years. And I finally wore out my welcome at my mom's house, and now I'm staying at my uncle's house in Plano, Texas. And I make a go at it at another place, And this little big book guy takes me under his wing, and they're telling me to keep coming back. Don't drink no matter what. 90 meetings in 90 days. And I'm thinking, I'll show you suckers 90 meetings in 90 days. I hit the noon, the 6, and the 8 for 90 days. I went to 270 meetings in 90 days. Day 91, I'm looking for a tall building and a rifle because this ain't working. I ended up in this little treatment center in South Dallas. It ain't a nice one. It's in a bad part of town. They get state funds. Not exactly the crowd I roll around with, but this is where I end up. I make it through their 90-day program. I know the director of the place. I still talk to him frequently, or infrequently these days, but he's still around. I mean, he would have bet his right one that I'd never take a drink when I left that treatment center. I drank within a week. You know, I decided to take the high road and not have my parents bail me out anymore, so I'm going to live in a halfway house. And I'll pull myself up by the bootstraps. And I got a little big book thumper for a sponsor, and we're reading the big book. I get a little job. I don't have a car, catching the bus to the train to the bus to get to work all day, to catch the bus to the train, to get back to the halfway house, to get cleaned up, have some dinner, catch the bus to the train to get to a meeting. And that went on for like 2 months. And I figured out I don't need to stay in this halfway house because none of you suckers are doing anything right. And I've got some money in my pocket, never been to jail, nothing's ever bad happened to. On a Sunday morning during the NC2A basketball tournament, a beautiful early spring day, I catch the bus to the train to the bus to get to Lower Greenville of Texas with my little backpack. I'm looking for me a place to live because that's going to fix everything. I stopped into a place which I had frequented many, many times before, been going to it for years, stopped over to have some tacos, have a soda, look at the basketball scores, check my brackets, make some phone calls, find an apartment. Next thing you know, I come to in Parkland Hospital with a felony possession, public intox, and kicking a police officer. And I was just out looking for an apartment. And they took me to Lou Sterrett, and I got to spend my first night in jail. And it was awful. I felt it was awful. And I remember in jail that first time, and I just remember pleading with God. God, if you get me out of this, I'll do anything. I'll call Frank. I'll go back to AA. I got money in the pocket. I know some high-dollar attorneys. I will beat this. Just get me out of here. I will do anything. And when Monday night rolled around and I bonded out, I gave me back my possessions. I walked outside. I put on my little Timex Ironman. I looked at my watch, and it was 8:45. I walked straight across the street to the liquor store and got me a fifth of vodka. And I can't stop from that point. And I have a few other stints in jail and a few other wrecked things, and I mean, my family doesn't want to have anything. You know, my mom talked to me one night. It was a time I was supposed to be sober. I wasn't sober. I'm talking to her, and she starts crying. And my mom had me when she was pretty young, and she says, you know, you're my baby. We grew up together, but if you have to keep drinking, you got to do it without us. Click. And I was drinking so heavily, I had to. They took me by ambulance, and they took me to this homeward bound place again, this little nasty treatment center, and I almost die in their detox. They shot me full of Haldol and some other stuff, and they didn't quite have the right antidote, and that didn't work out too well for me, and it was touch and go there for a while, and it was awful. And I was coming out of detox. I told them I'd stay for the 30 days or whatever, and I mean, they're like literally having to carry me around. I couldn't walk, and it was my first day out of detox. I'm going to the men's unit, and the guys were going down for a smoke break, and by the time they get me out there, the smoke break is over. You know, I'm in that bad a shape. And it's all cloudy to me, and they're like, well, come on, gentlemen, let's go. We got to get upstairs. We got a group tonight. And my head's spinning. I lean over to this guy, and I'm like, what kind of group do you have on Friday nights? And he's like, we've got AA. And I was like, oh, crap. God almighty. And so they propped me up in the corner of this room so I couldn't fall out of my chair, right? And these two guys from Primary Purpose Group came in, and there was this gray-haired guy with a beard named Myers, and he comes in, and he's got his big book up there, and he starts frothing at the mouth, busting it out. And I'm just sitting there just going, oh my God, you know. And then he passes it off to this little old man, his sponsor, Cliff Bishop. This guy looks like he's about 90 years old. He's been sober forever. He gets up, he's got this tattered old big book. It's like duct tape and stuff together. The guy doesn't even open the friggin' book and starts, turn to this page, turn to that page. And he's breaking down doctor's opinion and AA history and stuff. And I'm just sitting there just going, whoa, where did this come from? And I talked to him afterwards. They put me in touch with one of their proteges, and this guy starts to take me through the steps while I'm in that treatment center, and again, I start to get the hope. And I get out of there. I'm staying at one of my brother's house in North Dallas. I'm working in downtown Dallas, and I'm trying to go to primary purpose group. They're trying to take me through the steps. And by this time, I'm tens of thousands of dollars in debt. I got a beater of a car. I have zero friends, zero prospects, zero everything. And it's just all consuming. And I can't get myself out of the way to hear what you guys are telling me. And I'm going through the motions, you know. And I remember being there on a Thursday night at Primary Purpose, and I know I'm going to drink. I know I'm going to drink because that's what I do. I drink no matter what. It doesn't matter what the friggin' consequences are. I like what it says it's an appalling lack of perspective. I know what the consequences of me drinking are. There ain't no illusions about that. It's ugly. And I know I'm going to drink. But I tell him I'm going to do fine. I'm doing good. Matter of fact, I'm going to make an amends tonight after the meeting. And I remember sitting through that meeting, and we got through the big book study, and we said the Lord's Prayer, and I put up a few chairs, and I made a beeline out of there to the liquor store. And they didn't see me from that was in sometime of late 1998, and they didn't see me till September of 99. January and February of 1999, I'm in 6 emergency rooms, alcohol-related. I did boatloads of outside issues, but that ain't my deal. My outside issue stories actually worked out. Alcohol is my master. 6 emergency rooms. I can't stop drinking. I can't. I can't tell you how many times I have come to in the morning pleading with God, do not friggin' let it happen again today. And I'm there at the liquor store because I have to drink. I have to drink. And this I'm working in the design district with all these interior designers and stuff, and they take pity on me, and so they don't fire me for not showing up a lot of times. And I like rarely went on Mondays. Mondays were just off, and it was in the summer of 90. So I'm not going back to so I know I got to get sober. So I'm going to like my old home groups, you know, trying to get Desire Chips and trying to get it, you know? And I mean, they're not even clapping anymore, you know? They're like, I think he's been drinking, you know? I smell like the gutter, you know? I mean, they're not, you know, the fancy pants people ain't having nothing to do with me, you know? And I can't stay sober. And it's somewhere in the middle of the summer of 1999, and I didn't show up for work on a Monday. And Monday was like a taper day. I'm going to try to taper myself so I can get to work on Tuesday. I don't know about you. I'm a very bad taperer. I can't taper, you know, because of the phenomenon of craving. I just can't friggin' taper. I just drink it all. And if that runs out, I'll drink NyQuil. I'll drink rubbing alcohol. I don't care. I got to drink. And so I called in sick on a Tuesday and kind of got a little. So I tried to taper again on Tuesday. And I overshot the mark, and I woke up just awful on Wednesday. I tried to call in sick again, and my boss starts to give me the business over the phone, and I'm like, you know what? F you. F your little company, F your little job. Thanks for everything. Screw you later. And I remember throwing down my phone, and I just moved into this little garage apartment in Kessler Park. You know, it's like these old gingerbread homes, and like where all the doctors used to live back in the day. You got this little garage apartment, it's 2 stories. I got a dirty, filthy sofa, a clock radio, and my work clothes. That's the way I roll. Attractive, huh? It's cool. I remember throwing down the phone and hitting my knees, and I just started bawling. Because in my mind, I've tried AA. In my mind, God has dropped the ball. You dig? And I remember talking to God that day and saying, you know what, God, I ain't mad at you. I've tried AA. It sucks. and I can't friggin' take it no more. I know my medical history. I'm like that close to dying drunk. I'm like there. I'm like, make it happen. And I did not leave that. The only time I left that garage apartment from the end of July until Labor Day weekend of 1999 was to get down the 3.2 miles to Industrial Boulevard, where I would get by as many plastic jugs of Skull vodka as I could carry in the condition that I was in. Get back to my garage apartment, lock the door, and drink those bottles as fast as I could drink because I wanted to die. And that went on day after day after day. And I keep coming to, and I'd summon all my forces, and I'd gather it up, and I'd go get more vodka, and I'd come back, and I'd do it again. And on Friday of Labor Day weekend, 1999, I came to. I have blood all over me, and I haven't been stabbed. That's just me throwing up. My house smells like someone has died, and that's just me, because I'm literally dying from the inside out. And there's empty Skull vodka bottles all over the place, and I'm sitting there, and I start crying, and I have this epiphany. I don't friggin' want to die drunk. And it's kind of shady after that. Apparently, I called my sponsors like, hey, we're going to Homeward Bound tonight. You want me to come get you? And I was like, you know. And I said, I'm going to call one of my brothers. And my brother Joel was in Fort Worth going to seminary. He's getting his master's in theology. So there's God up all in my family, you dig? Right? He's getting his, so I don't know if any of y'all are the oldest, but I'm the oldest, right? And so like when they were growing up, they kind of looked up to me. Like I taught them how to do stuff, you know? Taught them how to play football, how to play tennis, you know, how to do this, tweak this, you know? They kind of looked up to me. And my brother gets to walk in on me that day, and I'm like 30 or 40 pounds underweight. I smell like death. I'm unwholesome. I'm unlovable. And that's what he gets to roll up on. And he's like, dude, we got to take you to the hospital. And I said, they ain't going to take me. He's like, well, they got to take you. I said, dude, they ain't going to take me. Here's why. I'll tell you why. So one of those hospital visits earlier in the year, apparently Parkland Hospital emergency room, they get a little pissed off if you've jumped the line because you complain of chest pains while you're detoxing, and they've got you hooked up to all their emergency room equipment, and they catch you drinking vodka, which you've poured into a water bottle. And so I said, Joel, they ain't going to take me. I'm on I got blacklisted from the hospital. So he's like, what do I do? And I said, you just got to check on me. Because I've had all the seizures. I've been through DTs a couple times. I know I said, you just got to check on me. If I start to flip out or go into seizures, call the ambulance. And that was my last detox. And no meds, ugly. I could have died. It was awful. Awful. I tried to make a run for it on that Saturday night. I knew there was a liquor store like 5 blocks away from his house. I literally had $21 to my name. And he had a little garage apartment. And I said, well, I'm going to go to bed and try to get some sleep because I hadn't slept at all. And I'm going to make a run for it. And I get to his back fence. It was locked. It might as well have been 50 foot high because I wasn't getting over it in the condition I was in. So I had to shake it out. It was awful. My brain screaming for drink the whole time. He had been talking to my sponsor, Matthew. I made a commitment over that weekend at Labor Day that I would go to Primary Purpose. And over the weekend, that boss who I so sorely treated had left me a voicemail that to the extent of, hey, the owners are in Europe. A project came in your absence. You're like the only dude that can pull this off. Can you please come back on the Tuesday after Labor Day, work this project, I'll pay you in cash, and then basically I don't ever want to see you again. So being that I had $21 to my name, newly sober, shaking it out, I said, sure. So on that Tuesday, I go, I'm calling Matthew, my sponsor at the time, throughout the day. He's calling me. And I mean, my brain is screaming for vodka. My brain's like, you're going to die, dude. Drink. You know, and I'm sweating at it all out, and it was just awful, 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 awful. About 5 o'clock, he calls me, and he says, hey, change of plans. And I said, well, I'm going to the meeting. He said, that's cool. He goes, Rachel's having a baby. We're going to the hospital. See Cliff. And I was like, oh, God. And he said, don't go home. Don't get cleaned up or nothing. Just go from work, get you something to drink or whatever, and go to the meeting. And I walked into that church where we had the meeting, and he was on the other side over there where the coffee pots are. And I walked in the church smelling, vibrating, shaking, you know, and how we walk when we're detoxing. And my limbs are just uncontrollable, you know, spazzing out. And he makes a beeline towards me, and I'm trying to be the tough guy, you know, and like, I really need to talk to you. And he's like, what the hell can I do for you? And by then I'm kind of crying and stuff, and I'm like, I don't want to die drunk. And he's like, follow me. And they're getting ready to have the meeting. He takes me into this little parlor room inside this church, and he sits me down. And in that short amount of time, like, this program comes alive, you know, because I'd heard his story before, but he starts telling me some stuff about him. He starts asking me some stuff about me. We start that identification process, and he gets me right where he wants to get me. And he says, are you a real alcoholic? And by then I am snotting and crying. And I'm like, yes, sir, I'm a real alcoholic. And he says, you're screwed. You're going to die drunk. Look at you. And he wasn't doing it to shock me or whatever. I'd been around there. It's not like I was a brand new newcomer. It was the friggin' truth. I was going to die drunk. And he says, do you believe it works for me? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I know it works for you. Well, do you think it works for Myers and Dara and Ed and all those people out there? I'm like, I know it does. He's like, damn right it does. If it didn't work, they'd be playing bingo in this church tonight. He said, how well does your way work? And I said, it's not. He says, great, I'm your sponsor. And I went, oh, in my head, I was like, oh, crap. I got this guy. And he said, you're going to read what I tell you to read. You're going to go where I tell you to go. You're going to do what I tell you to do, which is in the first 164 of this book. And the minute you balk, go away. And I said, yes, sir. He says, when you get home tonight, I want you to take a spin through the doctor's opinion. And if you get past that, read Bill's story and see if you can identify with anything in Bill's story. And he said, before you go to bed, I want you to look at your ceiling and just say, thank you for giving me another shot. And I got my last desire chip that night. And I got home. I called my sainted mother. She's like, did you go to the meeting? I said, yes, I went to the meeting. She goes, was Matthew there? She knew Matthew. I said, he wasn't there. And you can kind of hear her hopes fall over the phone. And I said, it's okay. His wife's having a baby. I got another sponsor. And she says, who's your sponsor? And I said, Cliff Bishop. And she started crying. And I said, why are you crying? And she says, because I've been praying. And I said, well, I've got some reading to do, and I'm kind of scared of the old man. I have to pray to my ceiling. Don't ask. But I'll call you tomorrow. And I got cleaned up, and I read what he told me to read, and I underlined some stuff where I identified with Bill. And I remember getting in front of that dirty sofa on my knees and looking at my ceiling and telling God, thank you for giving me another shot. And I remember putting my head down that night, still vibrating and shaking and everything. And I remember as I'm laying down, trying to go to sleep, my brain comes up with, dude, we don't got to drink no more. And I don't know where that came from. And I called the old man the next day when he told me to call, and he asked me if I read. We talked about that stuff, and he said, great, I'm speaking at so-and-so group tonight. It starts at 8 o'clock. Be there at 7:30. And I got there at 7:30. He didn't even talk to me. And I got to hear his story again. And then at the parking lot after everybody left, then he starts talking to me, and he asked me some stuff about it I read, blah, blah, blah. He said, great, I'll talk to you tomorrow. I said, all right. And I read my stuff that night. I called him the next day. He said, you're coming to the meeting tonight, right? Because we only meet, primary purpose, we meet Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays at 7:30 p.m. It's absolutely impossible to do 90 meetings in 90 days in my group. He says, you coming to the meeting tonight? And I said, yes, sir. He said, great. On your way to the meeting, I need you to stop by Salvation Army, and you need to pick up Manny, Mo, and Jack, get them to our meeting, and get them back to Salvation Army before they miss curfew. Click. Didn't ask if it was on my way, if it fit into my busy little schedule. My job was to do. I picked up the 3 knuckleheads, got them to our meeting, got them a coat, made sure they got back, right? And that's just the way he did. He said that night, he said, since you went through Homeward Bound, you on Friday nights, your job is to go listen to Myers and Kurt do that meeting at Homeward Bound. And I said, yes, sir. My job wasn't to talk. My job was to pay attention, take some little red books, and try to be helpful. And that weekend, we went over the stuff I've been reading. We made sure I was crystal clear on step 1. I got step 2. I didn't realize that night that I got my desire chip, I did steps 1 and 2. Step 1, I'm screwed. Step 2, I hope what worked for you will work for me. Why? Because I'm screwed in step 1. That's simple. We didn't talk about the friggin' essence of God or nothing like that. I'm screwed in 1, I hope in 2. Move on. Steps are designed to get me to the power, whatever that power is. Guaranteed to get me to that power if I take the step. So we got ready to do the 3rd step prayer. I'd done it before several different times, variations. He says, you ready to do it? I said, buddy, I'll do anything. And he's like, we'll see about that. Follow me. And we walked into another part of the house where nobody goes, a little bench in there. And we got on our knees, and we're going to do the 3rd step prayer. The book's open to page 63. And we got on our knees, and he says, before you do your 3rd step prayer, I'm going to say a little prayer, make sure God's with us, and then you can do the prayer. And you can read it out of the book or do it with your own words. And I said, yes, sir. And we got on our knees, my arms around him. I'm still vibrating the booze out. And he says a little prayer. I got no idea what he's saying. Because in my head, I'm praying my rear end off. Because I got to get sober now. And I guess there was some silence there between prayers. And he's like, nudges me. He's like, I need to hear what you're saying to God. And I said something like this. I said, dear God, I've tried to get sober since 1988, and I'm scared, and I don't want to die drunk. I need your help. Please give me the willingness to do whatever I got to do to get what's in this book. Amen. And he said, stand up. I thought I'd screwed up, I stood up, and he gave me a hug, and he said, you just did the 3rd step prayer. What did I do? I voiced it without reservation. I surrendered. There ain't no lurking notion. The Holy Trinity for an alcoholic dude, the car, the job, and the girl ain't going to fix it. I'm screwed, right? I surrendered and I asked for help. I felt pretty darn good at that. I felt a little hope. My 3rd step was pretty cool. But there's a whole lot of stuff blocking me from the power that's going to save my life. In the 3rd step prayer, it says, this is one of the coolest promises. It says, we have a new employer. Being all powerful, he provided what we needed, comma. Here's the catch. Provided we stay close to God and perform his work well. That's my job description. Till the day I die. My job today, just like it was in 1999, my job is to stay close to God and perform his work well. Today, no matter what happens, no matter if I get hired, if I get fired, if she comes back or she leaves, it don't really matter. My job today is to do my job. What do I get? Everything I need. If God is providing, well, first of all, God is either everything or else he's nothing. If God is everything and he's providing me with what I need, what else do I need? That's kind of simple. At the bottom of page 63, the big book tells me precisely when I'm supposed to do a 4th step. It says next we launch on a course of vigorous action. Next. I like that. Next. Not next week, next month. Bill is very precise in his writing. He says next. It's like the last payday before Christmas, right? And you got to get the check cashed so you can buy your sweetie pie, the big Christmas gift, right? And you end up at the local bank, and every other sucker in Lincoln is at the bank in front of you. And you're standing in the line. And if you're like me, I don't like standing in the line. And I'm waiting, and I got to get the check cashed because I got to get my sweetie pie's, big gift, right? And I finally make it to the front of the line. I look at all the tellers, and the tellers are full with you guys. And one of you leaves, and there's an opening. And the teller says, next. Do you think I prayed about it? No, I immediately launched into a course of action. My 4 steps, see, from here on out, the 3rd step on out, the actions I take today show God how willing I am not to pick up a drink. Me thinking about it shows God nothing. Me sitting down at a table, saying a prayer, taking out a pen and paper, and writing my 4th step shows God I'm willing to go to any length not to drink. And there's a whole bunch of garbage blocking me from the power. He gave me a week to complete it. I did it within the week. I called him, told him it was done. He said, be here tomorrow at noon. I went over there the next day at noon, and I got to find out the truth about me during my 5th step. I, who think so highly of myself, I'm actually, you know what? I lie, cheat, con, steal, manipulate, arouse jealousy, suspicion, but you name it. I will do absolutely anything to get my way. And if I got to be real nice and pay you a compliment to get my way, I'll do that. And if that don't work, screw you. Because I'm going to get what I need to get so I can be happy. And look at all the wreckage that I created. And he kind of tricked me. He said a little prayer before we started my 4th step, and I got him all out my paperwork laid out, and I'm all vibrating and sweaty, and he said a little prayer, and he says, all right, resentments, number 1 offender. He said, give me the biggest, baddest one you got. In typical alcoholic, I got to show some gamesmanship. It's like, I got to flip through my papers. The biggest, baddest one, you see? Why do we do that? I mean, if you sat me down on a bar stool, I'd tell you straight away, you know? But I said, I got it. He says, well, who is it? I said, it's my dad. He says, well, tell me about your dad. So I got to tell him. And for you cats that have never been to court or been in trouble, a 5th step is not like court. What I say can and will be used against me in my 5th step. So he asked me about my dad, and I started telling him about my dad. Now it's cool, but back then, that was a big deal for me. Right? Because I hated my dad, or disliked strongly, I guess we should say. My dad ditched me and my mom when I was a little boy. My dad used to call me and say he was going to come up and never show up. What do you want for Christmas? It would never arrive. And it was just one defeat after another. And it affected everything in my life. If you were my buddy and you were driving us to the football game and you were going to pick me up at 6 o'clock, at 6:05, I instantly think you suck, that you're not my friend. And it just, if you dated me, God forbid, it was awful. It affected everything. It affected his whole side of the family. I would have nothing to do with them. And as I'm telling, he's feeding me, he just question after question. And I'm like getting it all out. And I mean, just the veins are popping out and everything. And I was just done. He's like, wow, sounds like your dad's an alcoholic. What a coincidence. You're an alcoholic. And that was about as good as I got. Sounds like your dad made some bad decisions based on his drinking. And so, yes, sir. Sounds like you've made some bad decisions, and just on and on. And see, what I got to learn about that is, you know what? My dad is one of God's kids too. And my dad grew up in a brutal alcoholic household that I didn't have to grow up in. And my dad really, you know what? Given the tools that he had, my dad did the friggin' best job that he knew how to do. And who in the hell am I to judge him? I mean, like when I was born in West Texas Hospital in Lubbock, Texas, they didn't stamp my bottom with God's gift to little boys. And here I am taking something that happened 30 friggin' years ago and using it as a reason today to roll over the top of you. That ain't his problem. That's mine. And I got to see the truth. And those relationships, all these wonderful girls that I dated over the years, I just annihilated those relationships. You look at those questions on page 69, those are some brutal questions to ask yourself on a relationship. Did you arouse jealousy, suspicion, and bitterness? On and on. How did I treat the girls in my life that I supposedly loved or cared for? Pretty poorly. It was it always gets quiet in this because we didn't spend hours and hours and hours. I got to see the truth. And it was extremely humbling to understand that that's me. Left to my own devices, that is the garbage in my life. And I did that. And I remember driving home, and I lived like 8 miles from him, and I didn't, the radio I didn't even turn it on. It was just a silent drive home, and I got home, and I opened my book, and I'm doing the meditating for the hour, and I remember looking at my book, and I'd said the prayers, and I'm reading this stuff on page 75, and it says, carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we've asked if we've omitted anything. For we're building an arch to which we shall walk a free man at last. And I'm like, oh, crap. Because I omitted. Omit, and for those of you who don't know, omit and forget are 2 different things. I've forgotten most of the 80s and 90s. Omit is me leaving something out on purpose. And I did. And good John Kelly's saying, call Cliff. Bad John Kelly's like, blow it off, dude. This is embarrassing, And but I kept looking at that sentence, and it says, free man at last. And I don't know how long I sat there, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but I kept looking at that. In that big book I had at the time, I actually drew a box around the word free. Because out of all those 50 or 60 desire chips that I had gotten over the years, out of all those times where I had a week sober, 30 days sober, 60 days sober, regardless of the time, the one thing that I never, ever, ever was free. Because even back in the day when I wasn't drinking, I was thinking about drinking. I was thinking about how in the heck I'm going to get through the day without drinking. Even when I wasn't drinking, booze owned me. And you can't be half free. You're either free or you ain't. It's like you can't be half pregnant. You either are or you're not. And I picked up the phone and called the old man. And he blew my mind. He said, I've been expecting your call. And I told him what I needed to tell him. He laughed at me. He's like, well, GD, John, don't do that again. That'll kill you. Start your hour over, and I did that, and I started my list on my amends, and we started going through, and he's guiding me through the amends process, and my life starts to change. As I'm talking to people that were close to, like my mom and everything, before we'd hang up, she said, you sound good. You sound different. I'm like, okay, love you, I'm like, I don't know. I'm just doing what I'm supposed to be doing, And in a short amount of time, I went from in the gutter to being a recovered member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Before the month was up, Myers asked me to read a page or 2 at Homeward Bound, and I'm stumbling, fumbling, and mispronouncing words. Oh, it was awful, 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 awful. Some poor sucker at Homeward Bound asked me to take him through the steps. I'm like, you realize I got like 27 days. He's like, if you can get 27 days, I'll try this, I called Cliff, and I said, this guy asked me to help him. He's like, you didn't tell him no, did you? And I'm like, well, I know, but I got like 20-something days. He's like, dude, that's why they wrote the book. The instructions are in the book. I'm going to help you read the damn book. You can't screw it up. I'm like, okay. And I started to make these little amends that were close by. And like I said, my life starts to change. And one of those big ones that was looming large was my mama. Because, I've lied to her. I've cheated. My family has hit their all-time lows as a family as a result of my drinking, and they don't drink. I can't tell you how many times that I've sucked my family back in to trust in me again, only to I'm going to kick them in the teeth one more time. And I have told her every lie in the book, every happy, middle-of-the-road slogan, just to get my way. I've stolen from her business. I've stolen from her pocketbook. I became all that stuff. And I've wrecked her cars. All these things have a price tag, but the thing you can't put a price on is like love. Like how many nights, because I know she did this, how many nights did that poor woman cry herself to sleep not knowing if the next friggin' phone call was the one where I'm dead? So this is a biggie. And I've been working with Cliff on it, all my ducks in a row. I've been praying about it. I made the appointment. set it up with her on a Saturday morning, and I drive up to see her. It's the first time I've seen her since I've been sober, and this is a biggie. And I'm praying the whole way up there, and I get to her house, and she's sitting on the front porch drinking some coffee on a Saturday morning, and I say another little quickie prayer, and I get out of my little beat-up car, and I'm walking around the car, and as I'm walking around the car, she's walking towards me, and she's crying. I thought I ran over the dog or something. I'm like, oh, God, So I'm walking up to her, and she hugs me. She's crying. I'm trying to not cry. Of course, I start crying, and I'm like, why are you crying? And she stops hugging me, and she stands back, and she says, because you're different. She goes, as soon as I saw your head pop up out of your car, you're changed. And she grabs my hand, and she takes me to the porch, and we sit down, and I start to go through this amends process, and I start saying what I needed to say from the bottom of my heart, and she just stops. She's bawling all over the place, and she just stops, and she grabs my hand, and she says, stop. You don't owe me anything. You're my baby, and I just wanted you back. And for a split second, evil John Kelly's like, ha, we got off easy. And then she says, I don't know what you cats are doing in Dallas at Primary Purpose. Whatever it is, I want you to keep doing it because it makes me happy. And I'm barely 17 years old behind my mom in age. And if she lives to be 100, I better be 83 and a half, kicking butt, taking names with regards to this program because it makes her happy. And my family came back to me. My sister married a preacher. Other brothers went to seminary. They're educators and stuff. They now have me. I'm back to big brother, or cool Uncle John now with all the little nephews and nieces. And I would have missed all of that left to my own devices. I'm the guy that sits on the back row of AA left to my own devices and hope the game comes to me. Hopefully go to these little meetings where they're discussing everything, and hopefully one of you gurus is going to say something to keep me sober for the next 23 and a half hours. And that don't work for me. God designed me to do one thing, help drunks. I know where to find drunks. Put me anywhere on God's green earth. I got a God of my understanding, and I got a big book, and I know how to find drunks. And I'll be okay. God's got my back. And for that, I'm very, very grateful. Our group has grown up tremendously in the years that I've been sober. We do a lot of outreach. We've got 52 or 51 places on our outreach list, places that we go to in Dallas weekly. People from our group, 52 places. There's like 400 other groups around the world that have patterned their big book studies after our big book studies. I'm not tooting my own horn, but we're just trying to keep it real. The program is the program. Like David Aronofsky in Dallas used to say before he died, he said, if you want to know what AA is, it's everything in the first 164. If you want to know what AA is, and it's anything that's not in the first 164. And for you cats here, I'm going to end with this. I do that third step prayer on page 63, and you got to check out some of these promises in the 10th step on page 85. So it says that we cease fighting anything or anyone for even alcohol, for this time sanity will have returned. We'll seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as it were a hot flame. We react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically. I didn't do it. I took the steps. I had a spiritual experience. That happened. That's what God does. I didn't do it. It says, we'll see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That is the miracle of it. We're not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. I spent years trying to avoid. I got treatment centers 1 through 5 telling me I got to change my playmates, playthings, playpens. Don't go here, go there. Don't hang around those people, hang around these people. Well, let's review some stuff in the big book. Bill Wilson stops off at a cafe to use the telephone and ends up drunk. Cafes and telephones on his trigger list. Jim, the car salesman, stops off at a roadside cafe because he's hungry to have some sandwiches and some milk and ends up drunk. Sandwiches and milk on his trigger list. And poor Fred walks across the threshold of a dining room and ends up drunk, doorways on his trigger list. See, I'm free. I don't think about drinking. I don't think about not drinking. It has been removed. It does not exist. And it says that is how we will react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition, like work and self-sacrifice for others. (63 to 85). 22 pages in this big book. So if you're a guy or a gal who's struggling to stay sober, you just got to ask yourself one little question. Is your life worth doing 22 pages of work? Because that 22 pages of work will get you from a hopeless condition of mind and body to the power that saves your life. Thank you for having me.